Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. In the US, 1,459 people have died from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, taking the toll to nearly 166,000 with over 5 million cases. While Brazil's death toll has risen by 1,175 to over 104,000. In India, 942 more people have died, increasing the toll to over 47,000. Pakistan has reported 10 deaths overnight, taking the count to 6,129. Globally, over 749,000 people have lost their lives to the virus, with more than 20.5 million infected. The US says the Iranian Navy briefly seized a Liberian-flagged oil tanker near the strategic Strait of Hormuz. The US military releases a black and white video showing special forces fast roping down from a helicopter onto the tanker in eastern coast of the United Arab Emirates. Neither Iran nor the UAE have responded yet to the claims. The Taliban claim they have reliable intelligence information that ISIS intends to attack their prisoners after their release from the Pul-e-Charkhi jail in Kabul. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said the aim was to disrupt intra-Afghan negotiations. He asked Kabul to take the threat seriously and ensure all measures necessary to prevent the attack. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington may sanction Belarus over the ongoing violence in the country. In an interview, Pompeo said the U.S. is considering what it can do in a multilateral way to deliver a good outcome for the Belarusians. The U.S. and the European Union discredited the results of the presidential polls in Belarus after protests broke out in the country over rigging. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now for the news in detail. In the United States, 1,459 people have died from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, taking the toll to nearly 166,000 with over 5 million cases. While Brazil's death toll has risen by 1,175 to over 104,000. In India, 942 more people have died, increasing the toll to over 47,000. Globally, over 749,000 people have lost their lives to the coronavirus, with more than 20.5 million infected. This report has more details.
The COVID-19 raging through Americas, India, South Africa is now causing worries in parts of Europe and Australia. Deaths in Latin America continues to pile up as the overwhelmed healthcare systems crumble. Deaths in Latin America continue to pile up as the overwhelmed healthcare system crumbles under a load of thousands testing positive every day. Mexico has recorded 737 deaths overnight, increasing the tally to over 54,000. Despite leading the world in death toll and number of cases, U.S. President Donald Trump insists on reopening schools in the country.
I feel very badly for him. And I have a feeling that on November 4th, somebody's going to announce schools are open, the country's open, everything's open. I really believe a lot of it's done for political reasons, if you want to know the truth. I think so.
England is using a new contact tracing app for logging the spread of the virus as new spikes in Spain and Italy sound alarm bells in the region. Elsewhere, Australia is struggling to contain the second wave as Victoria and Melbourne continue to report hundreds of new cases. Over in New Zealand, authorities are scrambling to trace the source of a new outbreak in the country as fresh lockdown restrictions are imposed.
There are 13 new confirmed cases of COVID-19 to report in the community. They are all in Auckland, and they are all linked to the 4 people who we reported as confirmed cases yesterday and the day before. We will put the details of these cases up on our website, as we have in the past. That means we now have a total of 14 new confirmed cases to report today.
Mainland China has reported 19 new cases, down from 25 the previous day. South Korea has recorded 56 new infections as local transmission continues to be a spot of concern for authorities.
Meanwhile, Pakistan's coronavirus death rate continues to decline as 10 people have died from the coronavirus during the past 24 hours, bringing the toll to 6,139. The Health Ministry says 753 new infections have been reported in a day. The country's total number of active cases is 16,475, whereas over 264,000 people have recovered so far. As the country reports a remarkable 91% recovery rate, the country has over 1,800 ventilators, of which only 144 are currently occupied by critical patients. With 735 hospitals with COVID-19 facilities, Pakistan's healthcare facilities are fully equipped in dealing with the pandemic. Now, the U.S. says the Iranian Navy briefly seized a Liberian-flagged oil tanker near the strategic Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. military released a black and white video showing special forces fast roping down from a helicopter onto the tanker in eastern coast of the United Arab Emirates. They said the Iranian Navy held the vessel named MV Vela for nearly 5 hours before releasing it. The U.S. military's Central Command said the vessel had made no distress calls before, during, and after the seizure. It said the Iranian helicopter involved appeared to be a Sikorsky SH-3 Sea King, which only Iran's Navy operates. Neither Iran nor the UAE have responded to the United States' claims yet. Now, the Taliban claim they have reliable intelligence information that ISIS intends to attack their prisoners after their release from the Pul-e-Charkhi jail in Kabul. Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said the aim was to disrupt the intra-Afghan negotiations. He asked Kabul to take the threat seriously and ensure all measures necessary to prevent the attack. President Ashraf Ghani has signed a decree for the release of the remaining 400 Taliban prisoners to pave the way for intra-Afghan talks. Once the inmates are released, the negotiations will most likely start in Doha. Still in Afghanistan, where at least 4 police officers have been killed and 16 others wounded after a car bomb exploded near Farah City Police Headquarters. Officials said the bomb targeted the vehicle of Abdul Qadir, the deputy commander of Farah Security Department. They said 4 of his guards were killed in the attack. Earlier, the Afghan government said 6 policemen were killed and 5 others wounded in a Taliban attack in Nangarhar province. In a statement, the provincial governor said 3 Taliban fighters were also killed as security forces repulsed the attack. No group has claimed responsibility for the attacks yet. The violence comes on the heels of intra-Afghan talks expected to begin in Qatar this week. Moving on, Russia's President Vladimir Putin has urged Azerbaijan and Armenia to avoid actions that could inflame tensions. Earlier in July, tensions along the Azerbaijan-Armenia border escalated, killing 11 Azeris and 6 Armenians. The Russian state media says Putin discussed regional issues with his Azeri counterpart Ilham Aliyev in a phone call. It said the presidents also exchanged views on the worsening situation on the Azeri and Armenian state border. For his part, President Aliyev congratulated Putin on the registration of a coronavirus vaccine. Kremlin said the 2 leaders also discussed strengthening bilateral partnership in all areas. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates has condemned a Turkish drone attack that killed 2 high-ranking officials of Iraq. In a tweet, UAE State Minister for Foreign Affairs Anwar Gargash said the strike was an attack on Iraq's sovereignty. He said the country stands by the brotherly state of Iraq. Gargash added that UAE rejects regional meddling in Arab affairs. Meanwhile, Iraqi officials labeled the strike in the autonomous Kurdish region as blatant. Now, Saudi Arabia has stressed the importance of stability in Sudan and the unity of the country. In a statement, Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan said peace in North African country is directly related to development. Prince Faisal made these remarks at a Friends of Sudan meeting hosted by the kingdom. He said the kingdom appreciates United States' efforts to remove Sudan from a list of state sponsors of terrorism. The minister stressed that Saudi Arabia will exert all efforts to enable Sudan to resume its rightful place at the forefront of the Arab world. UN says Sudan is facing the worst food crisis in its recent history as 45 million population is deprived of food. Now moving on to Syria, which says sweeping new US sanctions are a part of its long-standing efforts to choke the living standards of Syrian people. In a speech at the presidential palace, President Bashar al-Assad held the curbs responsible for a fall in the local currency to new record lows. He said the latest sanctions, known as the Caesar Act, amounted to a new stage of economic warfare against his government. Assad said the country can preserve by raising its food self-sufficiency and by cracking down on corruption. The collapse of the currency has driven up inflation and aggravated hardship as Syrians struggle to afford food, electricity and other basic necessities. Earlier, state media said Assad had suffered low blood pressure for a few minutes while delivering the speech. Moving on, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington is considering sanctioning Belarus over the ongoing violence in the country. More about this in this report.
Belarus is navigating one of the biggest political crises in its post-Soviet history after the opposition rejected official results of the presidential election. Massive protests followed President Alexander Lukashenko's landslide re-election victory. The US and the European Union also discredited the results of the presidential polls in Belarus over rigging allegations. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says Washington is considering what it can do to multilaterally deliver a good outcome for the Belarusians.
As you said, we were incredibly troubled by the election and deeply disappointed that it wasn't more free and more fair. We've seen this behavior before, and we regret that this is how it's transpired. Then we've watched the violence in the aftermath, peaceful protesters being treated in ways that are inconsistent with how they should be treated.
The UN has also condemned the use of violence by Belarusian authorities on peaceful demonstrations. UN Human Rights Chief said police were reported to have used excessive force on the protesters. Meanwhile, Lithuania, Poland and Latvia have offered to mediate between the Belarusian government and the opposition. Lithuania's president has proposed a three-point plan to help resolve the situation.
First, the Belarusian government's institutions cease the use of violence against their citizens and de-escalate the situation. Second, Belarusian government releases detainees who are in thousands, all protest participants who have undergone repression up until now. And the third point is Belarusian institutions. Belarus renews dialogue with its civil society.
The European Union has called an extraordinary foreign ministers meeting tomorrow to discuss the situation in Belarus.
Well, now Greece says it's ready to enter a dialogue with Turkey to resolve the issue of the Eastern Mediterranean as per the international laws. Earlier, Turkish Defense Minister Hulusi Akar proposed the talks, saying Ankara wants to be a good neighbor to Athens. In a televised address, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis said the talks must not be under a climate of tensions and provocation. He said Greece seeks to build bridges of peace and good faith, but will not stand any blackmail. Meanwhile, France says it will temporarily increase its military presence in the Eastern Mediterranean in the coming days. In a statement, President Emmanuel Macron said the step has been taken in view of the escalating tensions between Greece and Turkey. The two NATO allies disagree over overlapping claims to hydrocarbon resources in the region. Now, in Scotland, 3 people have been killed and 6 others wounded after a train derailed in the Aberdeenshire. In a statement, British Transport Police said the train driver was also among the dead. About 30 emergency service vehicles, including 2 air ambulances, were called to the scene. Addressing the Parliament, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon declared the incident extremely serious. She said the government will do everything to support the emergency services and families. More news coming up after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. In California, state of the United States, a wildfire in North Los Angeles has forced a mandatory evacuation orders for some 500 homes. State authorities say more than 300 firefighters are battling the flames that have burned over 10,000 acres in just 3 hours. Helicopters and fixed-wing aircraft have also been deployed to the fight blaze. Earlier, the U.S. Department of Agriculture said a firefighter assigned to Stagecoach Fire had died. Wildfires have become more frequent and bigger in California in recent years. In November 2018, over 80 people were killed in the deadliest fire in the state's history, the Camp Fire. Argentina and Mexico have signed an agreement with a British company, AstraZeneca, to produce COVID-19 vaccine for Latin America, except for Brazil. The agreement includes a transfer of technology from AstraZeneca to these countries for the production of 150 million doses of vaccine. Argentina's President Alberto Fernandez said the vaccine will be fairly distributed among Latin countries in accordance to the demand.
The price of the vaccine is calculated to be between $3 and $4 per dose, and this is very important for Latin America because it allows for all countries to be able to get it.
Meanwhile, Brazil's Parana Institute has signed a memorandum of understanding with Russia for producing its vaccine by the second half of 2021. Now, moving on, a new species of dinosaur related to the Tyrannosaurus rex has been discovered in the south coast of England. In a statement, Southampton University paleontologists said they have spent months studying 4 bones that were found last year on the Isle of Wight. The paleontologists said they have determined that the bones were from the neck, back and tail of a new dinosaur. They named the dinosaur Vectaroventrator Inopinatus, a name that refers to large air sacs in some of the bones. Chris Barker, a PhD student at the university, said they were amazed as to how hollow this animal was. He said parts of its skeleton must have been rather delicate. The Isle of Wight is one of the top locations for dinosaur remains and fossils in Europe. Google says it will start detecting earthquakes around the world using the accelerometer sensors in Android phones. In a statement, the company said it will begin warning residents of California about expected turbulence with a rollout of quarter alerting technology.
Google says California, Japan, and Mexico already have warning systems that give people seconds to protect themselves before shaking reaches them. It said Indonesia and other countries with less cash for traditional sensors could catch up if the company's product proves effective. Seismology experts said turning smartphones into mini seismographs marked a huge advancement. Over 2.5 billion devices, including some tablets, run Google's Android operating system. Google's principal software engineer, Mark Strogaitis, said there are hundreds of millions of people that live near the earthquake fault zones. He said if people can get an early notice that an earthquake is coming towards them, they can protect themselves. According to Google, alerts would trigger for earthquakes of magnitudes 4.5 or greater. Meanwhile, the company said systems will not work in China, where Google's Play Services software is blocked.
Now, stocks in the Asia-Pacific are trading mixed following a surge in the U.S. markets overnight as tech stocks rallied. China's banks are expected to dispose of $490 billion worth of bad loans this year to revive the economy. Mainland Chinese stocks are subdued in early trading. The Shanghai Composite is trading flat while the Shenzhen Composite edged down. Hong Kong's Hang Seng has also slipped fractionally, but Japanese bourses bounced with Nikkei 225 jumping around 2%, while the Topix index also gained over 1%. South Korea's Kospi has also gained over 0.5%. Overall, the MSCI Asia shares have risen marginally. Meanwhile, the ASX 200 in Australia declined over 0.5%. Midfielder Blaise Matuidi has left Juventus amid reports linking the player to a move to Major League Soccer side Inter Miami. Matuidi and Juventus have mutually agreed to terminate the final year of his contract in Turin. The French World Cup winner made 45 appearances for the Italian club across all competitions last season. Inter Miami have lost all 5 matches so far in their debut MLS season. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.